We are live in living color from Scimitar Studios in Denville, New Jersey. You're listening live to the Open Mic program right here on Blog Talk Radio as we are in the midst of our spring training tour here in 2017. We opened up our spring training tour on Monday. We talked about the Cleveland Indians. That podcast is available on the Open Mic channel here on Blog Talk Radio. You can check that out in the archives a little later on. But today we have a great show. We're going to talk about the key rival for the Chicago Cubs in the National League Central, and that, of course, is the St. Louis Cardinals. And joining us today to talk about the Cardinals will be Steven McNeil of stlouishattrick.com, a brand new website that he is starting up, as he did write for fansided.com for St. Louis Cardinals, and he is really put together a nice site. It's going to talk about the Cardinals, the St. Louis Blues, and from what I understand, even movies as well. And Stephen joins us now to talk about the Cardinals as they get ready for this 2017 season. Stephen, how you doing?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have you back on. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the website. I know now you're writing for yourself on stlouishattrick.com. Talk to us about the website as you're looking to get it started up.
Well, I just have had this thing running in my head for some time that I should branch off and do my own thing. Last spring I kind of broke away from my role as editor and writer with Fansided. Just didn't really have the time with a new full-time job to really dedicate to the sites that they needed. So I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus over the summer, and so I just kind of had that itch to get back into writing, and decided that I was going to do something to see and just kind of see where it goes. My goal is to just do something to where, I enjoy it and have a good time, but also can be, somewhat successful on it. I miss being back on the scene in the blogging and area, so it was just something that I decided to get back into. And like I said in the first post, I had to come up with a name, and I came up with STL Hat Trick. And with the thought process of STL Hat Trick, I knew I was going to do Cardinals and Blues, and had to come up with a third wheel of the site to kind of cover to kind of match the name, and thought, I'm a huge movies fan, and especially, in the realm of comic book and kind of sci-fi type movies, big Star Wars and Marvel fan, specifically. And so I figured I would cover that avenue as well, kind of give it a third avenue and kind of expand things a little bit. But primarily, just like I said, just trying to have fun and create my own little niche on the internet and see what happens.
See what happens. I mean, it really does sound good. And I wish you, of course, nothing but the best of luck in getting that started. And I know you're probably going to be looking for writers as well to help you out. And I'm sure with the connections you've probably gained through Fansided, you probably could be able to get some people to jump aboard, friends as well. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck in getting that started up on your website.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's go right into talk about the St. Louis Cardinals for this season. I think one thing I can tell you about the Cardinals, just kind of like a broad perspective that people I think generally have going into the season, and you can correct me if I'm right or wrong on this, but I think a lot of people look at the Cardinals, they look at the NL Central, and they say, well, I think a lot of people just kind of assume the Chicago Cubs are going to go out there and win the division again and kind of dominate the division because they look at Pittsburgh. Looks like they're trying to recoil a little bit and trying to rebuild. A lot of rumors about trading Andrew McCutchen. Milwaukee and Cincinnati really aren't ready right now. And with St. Louis, what I've noticed is it seems like they're kind of in between a little bit. They have a lot of pieces that can still go out there and win, like an Adam Wainwright or Michael Wacha, guys who've been there with postseason experience, Johnny Peralta as well. And they have a lot of young guys that they're starting to bring up through the system over the last couple of years now. So the Cardinals are probably the best competition for the Cubs right now, but I don't know if they're really ready to jump ahead and be a serious postseason contender. We'll talk more about that, of course, but what are your thoughts on that broad generalization?
Yeah, I think you know what you're kind of spot on there. You as a fan of the Cardinals, you want the team to be better. Cubs obviously every year, and that's always kind of the, at least a if not the goal of the season, at least one of the goals of the season is to be better than your rival. But at this point in time, I mean, there's no denying the absolute monstrosity of a team that Chicago has. There's no doubt about it. They are a successful team. They are the team to beat, and they are the team to look for in the NL Central. And I would love to be able to say, hey, the Cardinals are going to compete, and the Cardinals are going to, give the Cubs a run for their money this season. But honestly, we have no clue what Cardinals team we're going to see. Granted, you're a season away from the team that did win 100 games, and also, was the number one seed in the National League playoffs 2 years ago. But it's not really the exact kind of makeup in the NL Central any longer. So it's interesting, and at the same time, you look at the Pirates in the same kind of light. They're a team that has come along in the past few years. That they really have. They still have the McCutchens and the the players that have done the part over the years to make them a real threat. But at the same time, they don't have what it takes to overthrow the NL Central juggernaut of Chicago. And it's like I said, I really wish that the Cardinals would be able to be that team that you want them to be, but at the same time, you have to be an expectation of reality. And I really don't expect the Cardinals to really be the team that overthrows Chicago this season. Now, there still is going to be some bright spots, and there's still a possibility that they could make the playoffs. But it's going to be an interesting season, that's for sure.
Yeah, it really will be. And, I look at this team, I think the one big strength the Cardinals have going into the year might be their starting pitching. If they're healthy, of course, is going to be their starting pitching. Adam Wainwright looking for a bounce-back year this year. I know he's starting to get up there a little bit in age, and there is concern about, how much longer he's going to have left at age 35. Guy's thrown a million innings throughout his career. You take a look, Michael Wacha, he's coming off of injury. Will he be healthy? Lance Lynn missed all of last year. A couple of years ago, this guy was a middle of the rotation starter. And then you have the prize out of that rotation last year was Carlos Martinez, who really became the ace of this team, winning 16 games, striking out 174 batters as an all-star last year. So 1 through 5, and I even include Mike Leake in there as well. 1 through 5, the Cardinals starting pitching is not that bad. I mean, they're going to keep this team in games all season long.
Absolutely. That's the one thing that they can hang their hat on, and the one thing they've been able to hang their hat on for the past few years is that they have built up this kind of empire, if you say, of starting pitching. And it's not just at the major league level; it's at the prospects and all of that. They literally have the best organization for starting pitching right now. And like I said, it's not something that just saying as a fan, but when you look at the organization and look at the starting 5 that they're going to put out this season, and then look throughout the ranks of the rest of the organization, there's really no other team that can compare to the level of talent that they have, in my opinion, from one level to the next. And like I said, that's even with Alex Reyes on the disabled list now, going with the unfortunate thing of having Tommy John surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, it's going to be their strength this year, and that's for sure. And that's even the question marks of Mike Leake and Adam Wainwright this season. There's not much that you really know guaranteed of what's going to happen, but still, I think most teams would take them in their rotation.
Now, you mentioned Alex Reyes on the disabled list right now with the Tommy John surgery. He was their number one prospect of the top 30 prospects they have to watch this year. There are a couple other guys coming up through the system, like Luke Weaver. Also, I read earlier today, Sandy Alcantara, who's really not ready at this point in his career, but he's another name that's coming up through the system. Any one of these guys, do you think could have an impact on this rotation this year, or do you think we're still another year away before we see some of these young guys come up and have an impact?
Well, I think absolutely, it's a given that you're going to see Weaver at some point make a start in this rotation, whether that be a spot start or a fill-in for an injury, or maybe even be a featured member of the rotation at some point, maybe because of an injury, or maybe even the possibility of a Mike Leake or an Adam Wainwright just not getting it done, or maybe even a Lance Lynn in that aspect. But actually, surprisingly enough, the Cardinals actually expect Sandy Alcantara to make his debut at some point this season, which is crazy talk, because when you think, as a fan, I think of Alcantara, and I think it was just two years ago that we really started hearing about this guy. You know, we got this fireballer guy being able to touch 100 miles an hour just in the Gulf Coast League. And, you know, at that point you're thinking, all right, this guy's 4 or 5 years down the road. We're not really going to see much, but the Cardinals are actually using the same process that they used with Carlos Martinez and Alex Reyes, with the expectation with this guy to be ready by this season to make at least an appearance in the major leagues this year. Whether that be in the rotation or in the bullpen will be, you know, deemed as throughout the season goes. But they've actually, or it's expectation of the organization that he at some point makes an appearance on the big league roster. And
wow, I mean, that would be amazing if he comes up this year, you know, let's just say, I don't know, middle of the year, and starts to have some form of an impact, even September for that matter, as a 40-man call-up. That would just be an amazing story right in and of itself, just to see him have that kind of impact, and maybe a year ahead of where he should be.
Yeah, and then that puts you into position to starting up the 2018 season with Sandy Alcantara, Carlos Martinez, and Alex Reyes. All three fantastic starting pitchers who have the ability to touch triple digits on the radar. And if you're featuring, you know, Alcantara out of the bullpen with Reyes and Martinez in the rotation, you're thinking, goodness gracious, you've got a formidable duo there with Martinez and Reyes in the rotation, and then Alcantara in the bullpen potentially. And it's not just Alcantara. You know, as if you're unfamiliar, I don't know if you're familiar with Marco Gonzalez, the St. Louis Cardinals #1 draft pick a few years ago, who actually had made the same kind of leap to the major leagues that Michael Wacha had made before him, making the leap into the major leagues right after being drafted. And things kind of have spiraled for him over the last 2 seasons as he's dealt with Tommy John injury as well as shoulder issues. So there's also the expectation that he's going to play some sort of role this season, maybe even, you know, kind of be the kind of left-handed spot starter that the Cardinals might need from time to time. I mean, at this point in time, he is a little bit of a question mark, but at the same time, not somebody to be forgotten of.
Let me go back to one of the veteran guys on this rotation. That's Adam Wainwright. You know, since the future is built on some of these guys that are coming up through the system, Wainwright now 35 years old. You know, was just on earshot under 200 innings last year. If I'm not mistaken, I believe has had his own injury problems. He had injury problems a couple of years ago, missed most of the year in 2015. Is this kind of like the last run for Wainwright in a lot of ways? Do you think he could be part of this rotation beyond just this season, or is this going to be his last kind of his swan song year for this team?
I find that an interesting situation. I really feel as if I've felt at times that Adam might be kind of at the end of the ropes as far as his career goes. Just doesn't really have, hasn't had the zip on his fastball that he's had in the past, and his curve has kind of lacked a little bit from what it's had. But at the same time, he's still shown that perseverance and that ability to just get through things. And towards the second half, end of the season, last season, Wainwright had improved quite a bit, and was not as I would say as struggling as much as he had been. And if you look at his numbers from last year, most of his struggles came in the early part of the year, as he was still trying in that point to build the strength back up into his legs, as he had the Achilles tendon injury the year prior, and he did make a pretty exceptional recovery in that, coming back in the same year, granted out of the bullpen. So there was a little bit of questioning on maybe he just didn't have the legs to get through things at the beginning. I will say at one point in time I had made a call during my time with Fansided for Wainwright to just kind of hang it up and let somebody else take the reins for now. But I really feel and I really believe in Wainwright's perseverance and his ability to kind of work through things. And I still think that he's going to play some important role this season. Of what, how well he's going to bounce back from last year, I can't tell you. And we'll see, as we get the season rolling here pretty soon, as to how effective Wainwright really is. But I think this is kind of a transition year for him. I think this is the year that he's pretty much passed the torch off to Carlos Martinez as the team's ace. And I think that, while he's going to be under contract, I believe, for at least another year or 2 years, I still believe that he's going to have a lot of questions that need to be answered by himself throughout this season. Is he going to be able to start beyond this season? I think so. I think that he's still going to have that ability to get back to at least some, I don't want to say major league average, but maybe slightly above average. Not necessarily be what he has been throughout his career, but be a kind of a serviceable number 3 or 4 starting pitcher for the team.
Yeah, and let's also be fair here and understand that last year it was his first full year back after the injury, so there is that transition as well. He did have a very good July and June and July. And the August, September numbers are up and down a little bit. They're a little bit inconsistent, but overall, it was an uneven year for Wainwright. I agree with you. I think this year is going to be very telling. We'll have to see where he is. I think we'll know where he is right away. If he's start of the year starting to look a little bit like the Wainwright we have gotten used to seeing over the years, maybe not necessarily blowing people away with strikeouts, but as a lot of pitchers who start to age start to use the strike zone to his advantage, start to develop as more of a pitcher's pitcher, if you will, that could lead into a very good year for Wainwright this year. So it's going to be an interesting transition for him to go from that power pitcher he was several years ago to now being more of a finesse guy that we see a lot of these guys do at the end of their careers.
Well, and Wainwright's never really been a Carlos Martinez type power pitcher.
Yeah.
He's always been a guy that's had to rely on location and movement, as well as his off-speed offerings as well, to kind of make up for the fact that he doesn't have a 96, 97 mile an hour fastball at all times. That's something he can kind of reach back for every once in a great while throughout his career. But I would say that he kind of thrives at this avenue of pitching that he's going through. And you know what? At the same time, I'm kind of thinking, a worst comes to worst, we might get kind of an Adam Wainwright that maybe sees as his transition towards kind of retirement, maybe he sees his effectiveness best used out of the bullpen, so that their team kind of utilizes somebody with a little bit more youth into the rotation later on in the season. And I'm kind of probably shooting from the hip at that point. But we'll see as we go throughout this 2017 season what Wainwright we're going to get. Are we going to get the guy from 2 years ago, or are we going to get the guy from a year ago?
Well, I will say this: we all know he has that experience in the coming out of the bullpen. We certainly, the people in New York know he's had that experience coming out of the bullpen. For that matter, referencing 2006. But I think he would do fine if that transition had to happen, where he had to go into the bullpen. I think he would do fine. I could kind of see that being like almost like a John Smoltz situation. Maybe not necessarily with him closing games out. I know they have O doing that, but to have him coming out of the bullpen in big spots in games, facing big hitters at some point down the stretch of the year, or maybe moving forward, I could simply see that for him at some point down the road. I could see him doing very well in that spot too.
Yeah, and they worked it out when he came back from the Achilles injury, where he was out of the bullpen and had quite a bit more life on his fastball. So we'll see. I mean, that's something I just kind of thought about and thought that might be a possibility later on in the season if we see to the fact that Wainwright is not effective in his starting position.
Now, speaking of the bullpen, there's also Trevor Rosenthal, and his story is very interesting this spring too, because they're talking about putting him into the rotation. I believe they're going to put him into the rotation on Monday with Martinez going over to the World Baseball Classic. They're going to give Rosenthal a chance to start some innings here for this team. He's kind of in transition himself, because he's going from a few years ago being one of the more dominant closers in this league to now being either a bullpen guy or a guy who could be inserted into the rotation or be an option for the rotation at some point down the road if they needed it. He's a very interesting story. He has never started a game in his career in the regular season at the major league level. I'll be very interested to see how the Cardinals build up his arm to do this, to go extended 4 or 5 innings at a time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of looking forward to this. Rosenthal, for his entire career, has had the effectiveness of having more than one solid pitch. He's always kind of had 2 off-speed offerings with a curveball and a changeup, as well as his fastball, which we all know is his bread and butter. But he came up through the minor leagues as a starter and was highly effective as a starter. And the only reason why the Cardinals really used him in the bullpen was because of the fastball. And so it's really fascinating to where he's kind of making a little bit of a transition in his career. Obviously, last year wasn't very effective for him. And it's quite interesting because Rosenthal was well on his way to being possibly, the best closer in St. Louis Cardinals history. He was well on his way to potentially tying Jason Isringhausen for the club lead for his career in saves. But things have changed and kind of changed gears a little bit in his career due to his ineffectiveness in that role last year. And the Cardinals kind of started to use him in this role that they're talking about using him in. They kind of started to use him last year in that route, and it kind of made him a little bit more effective. Towards the end of the season, they were using him in 2 and 3 inning spots, and I think that this could be a really good weapon for Mike Matheny this season. When you consider the fact that you've got a major league closer who can throw 2 to 3 innings no problem and kind of shut down a lineup if he's as effective as Cardinals fans and the team hopes for, become quite the weapon, and it's going to shorten games quite a bit when you consider you've got Trevor Rosenthal coming out for 2 or 3 innings, and then Sung Hwan Oh, who was incredibly effective last year, down the ninth inning. And then, if needed, you've got your Kevin Segrist and your Brett Cecil and however else the bullpen fills out. But I think that Rosenthal has the potential to become quite the weapon this year.
And, you can cut that in several different ways as well. You can look at it this way: if you ever get into a situation where you have an extra inning game, and if he is able to give Mike Matheny 2 or 3 innings, you can say, okay, here we are in the 10th inning. Let's try to extend this game the best we can. We're on the road. Let's throw Trevor Rosenthal out there for a few innings just to save a starter from having to come into the game because everyone else in the bullpen has been used. And 2, if you get into the postseason or you're playing September games that are going to help the Cardinals get into the postseason, he can almost be that kind of Andrew Miller type. We saw Andrew Miller go out there for the Indians last year and do that on almost a regular basis, almost to the point where everyone was wondering if his arm was going to fall off, throwing 2 or 3 innings coming out of the bullpen for Cleveland last year. I don't know if the Cardinals want to go to that route, or at least that extent, of course. But if he is able to go out there and pitch multiple innings, as you just illustrated, then yeah, that would be a huge benefit to what they can do.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. The Cardinals aren't only considering Rosenthal for this, but before the Alex Reyes injury, there was also the consideration of using Michael Wacha in this type of role. So the Cardinals are trying to do things creatively and think about a different way of approaching the bullpen.
So with Trevor Rosenthal in this bullpen, kind of like a flex option in a lot of ways. It does lengthen the bullpen up. You just mentioned and what he can do in this closer role, pitched very, very well for this team last year. So really overall, folks, as myself and Steven McNeil here talking about the St. Louis Cardinals for 2017, really there's a lot to look forward to as far as the pitching is concerned. It's a good pitching staff and, of course, a lot of young good pitchers coming up through the system. But as we now make the transition over to the offense, I think the offense is the biggest question mark for this team because they have a lot of ability, Steven. They hit the ball very well. They were second in the league in home runs last year. But the big problem is they don't get on base a lot. They don't hit for a very high average. This is something that is going to have to change. They'll be more consistent as hitters if they're going to have a big impact this year in chasing down the Cubs.
Absolutely. And I'd love to say that, the offense is just going to be so much better this year. But there's still a lot of question marks. As excited as I am about the Dexter Fowler signing and how he changes things, I am excited about Fowler. Don't get me wrong. I have my questions and concerns about Fowler. He has never really played a long season with a club that has played in a pitcher's ballpark. He's played in Chicago, Houston, Colorado, and all 3 of those clubs, for the most part, have hitters' ballparks. And so while I think Fowler is incredibly talented and will give the Cardinals a much-needed lift in the offense, I don't think that he alone is enough. I don't think he just all of a sudden changes this team into being an offensive superpower that is putting up 5 to 6 runs every game. I think that we're still going to they're still going to struggle with those 1-run games or those nights where the team just puts up just 1 to 2 to 3 runs, and the other team is putting up 6 or 7 on the other side. I think that they're still going to struggle in that avenue. That's where the pitching is going to have to pick them up, and the pitching is going to have to be better than it was last season for sure in that regard, because there were times where the Cardinals could have eked out a few more 1-run games, but the pitching kind of gave things away, and the offense kind of overachieved last year. But I really think that things should be better and a little bit more consistent this year with the addition of Fowler, with another the second year of Aledmys Diaz, and another season of Steven Piscotty, a maturing season for Steven Piscotty, and then maybe just maybe the gloves come off of Colton Wong and Randall Grichuk, and they stop worrying about their failures, and the two of them become more consistent for the team and just kind of become who they are, and everybody's stopping worrying about Grichuk's strikeouts and Wong's inabilities to hit for power, or ability to try to hit for power too often. Hopefully get better for the two of them. But I think, I believe in the Fowler acquisition as being helpful. I don't think it's going to be the be-all to end-all for the team. I don't think it's going to all of a sudden turn them, like I said, not going to all of a sudden turn them into an offensive superpower.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be helpful to have a nice 1-2 punch in having Fowler at leadoff and the change of Carpenter to the 3-hole, which is something that should have been done a long time ago,
mm-hmm.
even though the statistics show that Carpenter simply is a better offensive performer at the leadoff position. I think the team is committed to using him in that 3-hole spot this year to kind of really give the team a chance to drive in runs, because he has the bat and the ability to do so, and it's just, I guess never really got a fair shot to do so.
I think one of the big things that you mentioned and needs to be mentioned again is just the idea of getting on base. And that's one thing that Dexter Fowler gives the Cardinals is his ability to get on base. Now, he walked 79 times last year for the Chicago Cubs. He played a big role in the postseason. I know he didn't hit all that appreciably well, but when he did get on, he did have an impact in those games for Chicago. So to have him at the top of the order would be huge from that standpoint. It certainly won't hurt. And also, if you can put Matt Carpenter down in the lineup, Matt Carpenter, we always talk about the power numbers with him. He had 36 doubles, had 21 home runs last year, but the guy also walked 81 times, had a .380 on base percentage. So you have a couple of guys there at the top of the order that can get on base, produce runs that way with their legs, with also just getting on base, very disciplined hitters. That's going to be a big positive there. But if they can get some discipline out of guys like Piscotty and Grichuk, and both of those two guys are still fairly young. One's 25, the other's 26. They can get those guys to just cut down on the strikeouts. Grichuk struck out 141 times last year. Piscotty struck out 133 times last year, and pick it up on as far as the discipline at the plate, better eye at the plate. That could lead to more production for those two guys as well. Now, both of those guys hit a ton of home runs last year, but it was kind of like home run or strikeout at times last year for those two.
The strikeouts have got to come down, but at the same time with Grichuk, they have to be accepted because they're going to happen. There's no way to really avoid the strikeouts with him, because if the way you saw things last year
mm-hmm.
is that the team tried too hard to get Grichuk to kind of change his method, and unfortunately, it resulted in Grichuk just being confused. And at the point to where they finally said, all right, you go out and you do you, and you just swing when you swing, and he just seemed to do better. And so I think we, as a fan, it would be great for him to just develop into this, hitter with a keen batter's eye and the ability to lay off his pitches. But Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah, I agree.
We can't expect him to just all of a sudden become Mike Trout. He is who he is, and I think that if the team just kind of lets him be who he is and doesn't expect him to have the same kind of results as Matt Carpenter, and just kind of lets him be a bopper, then I think that the team will be more successful. And on Piscotty's end, I think that the sky's the limit with this guy. He's smart. He has the ability to get on base. He does strike out a little bit too much, and I think a part of that comes with his aggressiveness. But I honestly believe the sky's the limit with this guy. He has the potential to be a force to be reckoned with in this league. And I will be honest, before he came up in the majors, I really wasn't too high on this kid. I thought he was just your kind of professional hitter type person. Wasn't really going to be much of a threat at the major league level. It's just going to be a guy who kind of goes about his business and really wasn't really that kind of exciting player. But I really think that my opinion on him has changed, as well as the outlook for his career as well has changed. So expectations are much, much better for him than they had been early in his professional career.
So you think there's a very, very good chance that these two guys, especially Piscotty, are really going to develop into big-time stars in this league? And I would love to see it. I'd love to see these two guys become big-time pieces of not just what the Cardinals can do on the field, but also what's going on in Major League Baseball, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said, the biggest thing with Grichuk is just to have the lower expectations. We're not expecting him to be, like I said, Mike Trout or Matt Carpenter. We're expecting Grichuk to be Grichuk, and with Grichuk comes those strikeouts, and that we're just going to have to accept that as a part of his game. Just kind of treat it as another out. It is what it is.
Let me ask you about let's talk about a couple of veteran guys here that have been here for a while. And one, of course, Yadier Molina, who has been a legend for this team, probably going to be probably could be a Hall of Fame candidate at some point down the road. I mean, with the big postseason hits he's had, with the way he plays defense, probably going to be on the outfield wall with all the numbers and Hall of Fame players in Cardinals history. Really good player. And then you have Johnny Peralta, who only played in 82 games last year, also getting up there in age, adding contract. What do you think the Cardinal fan can expect from these two guys as they enter the twilight of their careers here?
I will say I want to start with Peralta. One of my biggest let me kind of think of the right word to say, my biggest qualms with the fan base this past, say 6-7 months has been the nagging on Johnny Peralta and the expectations of Johnny Peralta just to be a type person like this, just the guy that you put down at the end of the bench and at the end of the lineup, and you just bury him there. I honestly do not view Peralta in that light. I view Peralta as a guy who struggled last year, a guy who was in his mid to late 30s, who had a pretty serious thumb injury that really just kind of hampered his ability to grip the bat or have that ability to really kind of be the hitter he has been throughout his career. And I really feel that this year is a big opportunity for him. He's going into a contract year. Obviously, the Cardinals are not likely to be picking up a contract on him at the end of the season, but still other teams are going to be looking, and he has got the opportunity to extend his playing career beyond where he is now. And I think that this season is going to be huge for him. I'm not expecting him to hit 30 home runs and drive in 120. I expect him to be better than the expectations are for the most part. I expect him to be at least a 250, 260 hitter, with maybe 10 or 15 homers and 20 to 25 doubles. I expect him to be better than most do, because honestly, I don't think you just drop off the face of the earth as a hitter without any real reason. And I think that thumb really played a big impact in his hitting ability. And then when you cross that with Yadier Molina, and you look at how Molina bounced back last season in an offensive way, and you see the fact that Molina had struggled with the same injury the year prior and offensively was unable to produce for the most part, I think it's really kind of easy to see that thumb really did hamper Peralta's ability last season, more so than I had actually originally thought, because when I did the research on the injury, for the most part, players haven't really struggled offensively. I think it makes the idea of players struggling because of a thumb is smart. They use the thumb to grip. They're not going to be able to hold on the bat, but actually, from what the numbers show, players really hadn't struggled offensively as much. And Molina was a little bit of an outlier at that point, and now we've got Peralta's struggles mixed in. And so I think that played a part last season in him. And for Molina, I think, this season is going to be very telling. So whether or not he's going to be starting the season with an extension is going to be very telling for sure. And, he very well could be playing for an extended career, if not just with the Cardinals, but in the major leagues this season. And it's very, very intriguing. The situation that we have here, I'm not certain if you follow too much, but the average fan knows Molina's stature behind the plate. Or what the Cardinals have now is Major League Baseball's number one catching prospect, waiting in the wings and practically ready at this point. The Cardinals could get away with Carson Kelly as their catcher as early as this season if Molina was not around. But you have possibly the one of the best catchers of all time behind the backstop, and it's kind of one of those catch-22s. Like, do you make the veteran mad and let the rookie play, or do you tell the rookie his time will come and let the veteran kind of play out his career? It's a very intriguing situation, and the Cardinals are not in. I do not envy John Mozeliak in this position, because it is a very awkward position for the team. You've got this guy who's done everything for you, but at the same time, you've got this kid who's not making much of anything, who has the potential to kind of do the exact same thing that Molina's done throughout his career.
It's tough. I mean, it really is tough, because there are a lot of teams that end up in this kind of position at some point where they have a legendary player who has done so much for them, and then they have to make a decision whether they're going to let them go or not. My guess would be is they're going to let Molina play this year out as a starting catcher. Now, if there was a situation, they're going to basically let him lose the job. If he shows signs of wear and tear, maybe there's nagging injuries that prop up over the course of the year. Maybe there's situations where they feel that he just needs more time to rest, to recover from catching a long game the night before. Then maybe you'll start to see the signs that and all the flags point towards Chase Kelly coming up. And I think that would be the easiest way to make that transition happen, other than just saying, you know what, it won't be easy. I should take that back. But that's probably the one wet route they're probably going to look towards to making that transition happen, is to let Molina play this year out, hope that they can get similar numbers to what he put up last year, which were pretty good numbers. I know that the home run department wasn't what he's used to, but as far as hits, as far as hitting for average, RBIs, doubles, they were right up there for what he usually does. If he can produce this year, produce something even close to that, I think they'll sign up for it right now. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's kind of the thing. The thing with Yadier Molina throughout his career has been the offensive output has always been secondary. It's always been an added bonus. Because his ability to handle a pitching staff, his ability to hamper the running game, as well as kind of be that defensive superstar behind the plate, has always been the main reason why he plays. And so really the team knows that offensively, like that, whatever he puts out is gravy at this point, and it always has been. But it is something to think about in a team that needs offensive output. It is something to kind of look forward and kind of hope for, is that he does continue his his kind of ability from last season carried over to this season. And man, it's just the situation with him and Carson Kelly is just quite precarious, because not only does Carson Kelly have the ability to be a defensive stalwart behind the plate, Kelly can swing the bat too. He actually has a little bit more pop to his bat than Yadier Molina has, or has really ever had. There was the one season where Molina had over, I believe, 15 homers. But at the same time, nobody's ever really expected that from Molina. And Kelly comes with a little bit more of a known offensive commodity than Molina, and it's going to be fascinating. I think the club wants to keep Molina around beyond this season. I think they want next season to be kind of a duo, to say. They kind of want Molina to be the starter, but at the same time to have Kelly catch quite a bit of games, as well as getting maybe some games at other positions to kind of keep his bat going. And they kind of look forward to that for next year. I think for this year they want him to spend as much time in AAA as possible, continuing to get used to things there, and growing and not having the pressure of being up at the majors. But I think that it's going to be fascinating, and I think that the team wants to keep Yadier Molina beyond this year and next, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, he has to be paid. He has to be paid, and he has to be paid handsomely, because he is who he is. And it's not going to be an easy decision to make, and the team has been in this spot before. 12 years ago, the team had to make the decision between this young catching prospect or a defensive stalwart who had been behind the plate for years for the Cardinals and had done so well in Mike Matheny. And, they had to make the decision to, let's trust in the future of Yadier Molina. This young prospect who had the ability to kind of change things for the team. And Tony La Russa decided, that it was time to kind of hand the reins over to Molina. And with that, the team decided not to offer Matheny a contract. And so, granted, Matheny was never the player that Yadier Molina has been.
Right.
It's still a scenario to think about, and to think, to look at how the team handled that as well.
It's incredibly ironic, in a lot of ways, because here's Matheny, the manager of the team, and he's going to be part of the decision-making on Yadier Molina's future. Kind of funny how things come around and go around, for that matter. But one thing that I'm going to assume is going to be off the table is just the idea of first base. I know every team does this with their catcher. We saw the Twins do it with Joe Mauer. We've seen the Mets do it many years ago with Mike Piazza, where they say, let's consider moving our catcher to first base. I just don't see that happening. It's such a hard transition to go from behind the plate to first base, to learn a totally new position for that matter. It's not an easy position to learn and to get down. Even if you get it down right well, it's not easy to perform on a regular basis anyway. So I don't see that happening. I just see that
there's no way.
No way, not a chance. It's either going to be he's going to catch this year, and it will go free agent next year, or they'll try to trade him next year, or he's going to end up basically either catching or being a DH somewhere in the American League next year. That's basically what's going to happen.
And there's nobody who's going to give any position to Yadier Molina besides the catcher. And so Yadier Molina is different than any other aging catcher in the league, in that Yadier Molina's bat is not something that is to be desired, really. Yes, he's had some good seasons with the bat. He's had an ability to kind of make up for some deficiencies in that area. The defense is what Yadier Molina is, and there's no reason to try to put him in another position, because his stature as the catcher is that important, and it is greater than any other position that he could move to. And there's no offensive upgrade. There's no upgrade to moving Yadier Molina out of the catching position. He loses his value incredibly once you move him out of that position.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many other positions and players that we could talk about here today as well, but we are kind of we got about 9 minutes left. Again, let's just talk about the expectations for this team moving forward, and we can come back at some point down the road when we get towards the season, talk about other positions, other players. The expectations for this team going into the year, I think it's fair to say, and I kind of reiterating talking points from the beginning of the show, I think this team could certainly challenge for a wild card if all things go well. If the start pitchers can remain healthy, talking about guys like Lance Lynn, Adam Wainwright, if they can remain healthy and get close to reclaiming who they once were, that'll be a big benefit to them. And if this offense can be a little more disciplined to plate, I think they can certainly challenge for a wild card spot, one of the wild card spots, and get in and be part of the tournament in October. What are your expectations for this team going into this year?
I agree. My expectation is that this team will get a wild card at the end of the year. I think that this team is going to be hungry, and I think that this team is ready to defy expectations, to put it that way. I think that the team loves to be viewed as kind of a dark horse, or as a team that really isn't considered much to do anything. I think that this team would love to play spoiler in the playoffs. And I think as a fan, I would love to see that happen as well, as we've seen many other seasons before. It's kind of the funny thing is, the Cardinals have had all these great seasons. They finished 162 2 seasons ago and were out in the first round. They won over 100 games in 2004 and lost in the World Series, and won over 100 games the next year, I believe, and lost in the championship series, and then won like 83 games the next season and won the World Series. And then 2011 comes out and they kind of do the same thing. And so I think this team is going to thrive on the nobody's picking us to do much of anything mantra, and I think that this team is going to perform well. We might even see this team post a winning record against the Cubs this season. And I think the team would love to play spoiler. And as a fan, I'm going to enjoy watching this team play spoiler, because I really do think that this team is built for take this for what it is. And what I believe about this team is that the pitching is so strong. The pitching has the potential to carry this team throughout the season and then just be an absolute monster weapon in the postseason.
That could happen. Yeah, it could definitely happen. I mean, when you look at the San Francisco Giants, there's another team that over the years has had a lot of postseason success with their pitching, and that's a team that it's not built on offense at all. I mean, they don't hit the baseball well at all on a regular basis. They have a lot of clutch hitters. That's just about it. But their pitching has been the one key to get them throughout that run. And if the Cardinals get into the postseason, and you look at the way they match up against some teams, even the Cubs for that matter, I'm not going to sit here and say that they have a direct edge, but just based on starting pitching, if all their players line up the way they should, again, if Wainwright pitches the way he is expected to and kind of reclaims the pitcher he was from a few years ago, Lance Lynn can come back and pitch well and have an impact. You put those guys up against a Lester and a Kyle Hendricks, so I'm talking like 2-3. You're going to have Martinez against an Arrieta, and let's just say, just for a perspective, game one in a playoff situation. They'll have a chance. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to beat the Cubs. I mean, I still think the Cubs are probably the best team in the National League, let alone Major League Baseball. But the Cardinals are going to have a chance to make some noise against them or against anybody else.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the way I think every fan should look at it. We're not expecting them to be the division winner at the end of the year. That would be fantastic, and that would be an absolute best-case scenario. But the chances of that are slim. And the expectation for this team should be that they should contend for a wild card spot. Missed out, by one game last season, and it was tough. But I think the expectations are that this team should and will compete for a wild card this year.
Yeah. All right, Steven, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being part of the show today. Again, I'll be happy to have you back on at some point in the next going into the season, a few weeks into the season, talk more about the Cardinals, because there are a lot of players that we didn't even touch on, a lot of different position battles we didn't touch on that are still a big part of this team as they get ready for this season. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Cardinals can do in 2017.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the time, and if you need me ever again, I'll be more than willing to come on it and talk about the Cardinals.
Oh, no, absolutely. We'll definitely have you back on at some point down the road this season. Absolutely. Remember, you can follow Open Mic on Twitter at OpenMicNJ on Twitter and on Facebook, facebook.com/Open Mic Program.